ERCOT, the name of the state's power grid operator that you are all too familiar with now, will face scrutiny next week. That's already been underway, but next week it will be official as members of the Texas legislature get their chance to inspect the role that ERCOT played in those widespread power outages this week. Those outages have impacted millions of Texans, and as our defenders discovered, the massive storm barely received a mention during ERCOT's board meeting just last week. Dylan Collier on the growing evidence that they were not properly prepared.
Thank you, Bill. I feel like I have a virtual gavel here.
That was the voice of ERCOT's Sally Talberg moments after being voted chairperson of the board near the start of its February 9th meeting held virtually.
So as board chair, I have big shoes to fill. I think of large cowboy boots, actually.
Talberg, who according to public records lives in Michigan, made the attempt at humor before giving way to President Bill Magnus. Under fire much of the week for ERCOT's decision to shed power from the grid early Monday, spent less than 40 seconds during the 2.5-hour meeting talking about the impending storm.
We do have a cold front coming this way. We'll probably see our winter peak later this week or in the very early part of next week.
Magnus, senior staff, and the board instead spent a majority of the time discussing finances and the ongoing ERCOT projects.
I didn't mean to convey unconcerned.
Magnus today said while he only briefly discussed the storm with the board members, he feels like the agency communicated well with regulators across the state in the days before the winter blast arrived.
What I said indicated we weren't concerned. I really was just trying to notify the board that this is something we got to keep an eye on because it's coming at us.
And it is safe to assume everything about ERCOT will be dissected in the months ahead, including board members living out of state and some collecting large compensation packages despite only dedicating a handful of hours to the entity each week. Magnus himself, according to ERCOT's 2018 tax filings, was compensated well over $800,000 that year. Dylan Collier, KSAT 12 News.
So Texans, after suffering the worst possible week of their life, are now being pushed into debt by electricity providers that failed them during the time of great need. After all the difficulties they faced, so many Texans are now counting the amount of debt they have piled up in just a few days.
Officials in Texas are now investigating after several customers received sky-high energy bills as a result of that weather crisis. Customers in the state have the option to choose between fixed rates and market rate energy plans that are tied to the price utility companies pay for electricity. Well, when the winter storm wreaked havoc on the state's power grid, power prices shot up, and so did bills for customers on market rate plans.
For some like Ty Williams,
you're being held hostage and you can't do anything about it.
It's short-lived. During this winter storm, his electric bill for 3 meters climbed to more than $17,000. It usually hovers around $600 a month.
How in the world can anyone pay that?
You see, Williams is one of many who reached out to WFAA about their power bill soaring the last few days. And if you're not on a fixed contract with your energy provider and instead pay month to month based on current market prices like he does, you could be in the same boat because the Public Utility Commission of Texas raised prices to incentivize plants to produce more power. Jason Wheeler showed us Thursday night.
At one point, 1 megawatt went from $50 to about $9,000.
There are politicians who still scream from the rooftops about the importance of deregulation. And right there in Texas, we have the evidence. There are times when businesses will place profits before customers, will fail to heed to the warnings, will not invest to handle emergency scenarios because it costs too much. And even when they fail, they will just go ahead and transfer all their problems on their customers' shoulders. It's a free market. So when did it become free to do whatever you want? Over-regulation can stifle business, but senseless deregulation, where you leave all the decision-making to the CEOs, will only lead to a financial crisis like the one we had in 2008 and the crisis like the one we have in Texas. Millions of Texans have paid heavily in the last 1 week, some with their lives, for the incompetence of the power generators and an inept state government. Now, the customers may have to pay 10 times over because these utilities failed to prepare. Just when you think things cannot get any worse, They knocked us into senses to tell us that it can and it will. Top officials at ERCOT, the state's electric grid operator, spent a cool 40 seconds talking about the snowstorm in their final meeting before the storm hit. Yes, 40 full seconds. Some elected representatives in Texas are pushing for a rollback of the charges, and some local reporting said that the governor has agreed to take steps to provide relief for residents affected by the price surge. But all this goes on to show only one thing: how underprepared the utilities were in Texas and how quickly they were ready to transfer the cost of their ineptitude back to the customers. Overregulation can kill business, but deregulation can eat lives and livelihood. We don't need either. We need sensible regulation.